Ladies and gentlemen, it is finally time to understand how the timeline works inside of After Effects. So in this course, we're going to be breaking down how the timeline functions, what layers are inside of After Effects, and what all of these small knobs and small settings we've got on our timeline in After Effects actually do. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So with this being said, I'm back inside of Premiere Pro and I've got our dynamic link over here. The reason I wanted to do this is to show you guys something quick. So every time I want to access my dynamic link, I don't actually need to right click and replace on After Effects composition. I don't need to do that because that's going to replace my dynamic link with an After Effects composition. I'm going to have an After Effects composition inside of an After Effects composition. It's going to make things super complex. Instead, I can either right click and click on Edit Original, which is going to launch it in After Effects, or I could just close down Premiere Pro. And since I've already saved the After Effects project inside of my file, and since everything inside of Premiere Pro is now controlled by this After Effects project, I could just double click on this and launch it completely from scratch. Okay, and that's going to launch Adobe After Effects for me and launch this After Effects project. So this being said, I'm gonna give this thing a moment to launch, and there we go. You guys can see we are back on track. So since we are editing a short form video, I'm going to give myself a bit more space and just make sure that this thing fits on the frame, and we're good to go. We're probably going to go with something like this. Awesome. So we're going to expand our effects and presets a little bit and our project files a little bit. Optionally, you can place this on the right side of the screen if you're editing short form content, but I want to train you guys on this outline because we're going to be editing long form content soon as well. So what you guys can see is everything inside of my timeline is now different. My timeline is full with this layer. The way timelines work inside of After Effects is the first thing you have to understand, you can't have two things on the same layer. So inside of Premiere Pro, I can have a text here and then a gap that's empty and a text here. It doesn't work this way inside of After Effects. Unfortunately, things are a bit different. Inside of After Effects, your timeline works as layers. So you either have a layer that has an image that appears somewhere on the layer, and that's it. That layer is only focused for that image. And that's why you see so many of these editors have very huge towers of timelines. There's actually a whole trend on X where editors go and they share like how big their timelines are. So this being said, that's the first thing you need to understand. Like our raw video over here, this box, that's what our video is. And if I move this to the right or left, you can see it moves to the right or left. That is all that we could do. We can't have anything else on this timeline. If I want to add anything, I have to add it on top of our timeline. And you guys now can understand why cutting is so much easier inside of Premiere Pro. Now, either way, this is how our timeline works. Let's start big and then go small. What you have over here on my right side is the entire video. So this whole thing is our video layer. It's this thin strip of rectangle. If I hold down Alt and I use my scroll wheel, I can zoom in. And if I hold down Alt and scroll out, I can zoom out. Another thing you've got is your composition length. So up here, you guys can see 10F, 20F, and 01F. F stands for frames. So this is 20 frames. This is 1 second. This is 10 frames. This is 1 second and 10 frames here. This is 1 second and 20 frames. This is 2 seconds, so on and so forth. Okay. If you'd like to change this, I'm sure there's a way, but it's not going to be necessary for us now. So with this being said, you're also going to notice that there are these two blue things. Now the top blue line is used to control how much you want to zoom in or out. Now we do this with a shortcut because we already know how to do this inside of Premiere Pro. We hold down Alt and we just scroll in, and this allows us to zoom in. And as I do this, you guys can see my top line over here gets smaller. Okay, so this is used to zoom in and out. Now be careful not to mistake it with the line under it, because the line under it controls your composition. What this basically is, your composition is just how big your sequence is. Now my current composition is from this 0 all the way to this 20F, which means everything that's inside of this is inside of my composition. If I click on play, I have spoken with lots and lots of business owners, and there's always three main problems they're struggling with. I have spoken. You guys can see that this is my entire composition. Now, if I shrink my composition down, everything that is outside here on the right side won't even be visible. Like all of this stuff on the right side when I go to render is not even considered part of my edit anymore. Three main problems I have spoken with. It just cuts right before it. So it's very important to keep this in mind. As After Effects editors, sometimes you might just move this work area around, which is what we call your composition. And that's super, super important. You can actually make this mistake. So whenever you've got a smaller video and you want to make your composition smaller and you don't want a bunch of black empty space, make sure to set your start point of your composition before our footage and the end point right at the end. So I'm going to move my end point at the end of my footage. This makes sure that we don't have access to any of this dark empty backgrounds, and instead we just have our work footage. footage. Now let's say that our work footage was this long. How would you guys place the composition? Obviously, make sure that the start is right here and the end of our composition is at the end of our clip. Okay, this is what it means to be professional. Now, this being said, let's say you trim it down and you've got all of this empty space here. What do you do with it? It looks a bit weird. Well, this is where you can right click and you can do a few things. You can either lift the work area, which I won't explain. You can extract the work area, which I also won't explain, or you can trim the composition to the work area. Now, what this basically means is this. All of this kind of timeline up here, all of things, everything that you can see in my timeline, like the whole thing, that's what we call a composition. So your composition is from 0 frames all the way to the 6 seconds and 20 frames over here. Now, inside of my composition, I have some empty space here. If I want to remove this and make my composition smaller, the only way to do this is to right click and to click on trim comp to work area. This now trims our composition to the work area which we have set. Remember guys, the work area which we have set is based on these 2 blue points over here. So if I made my blue point over here closer and I right click and I trim my composition to my work area, now my composition is going to be just as big as my work area. So you can use this to make things bigger or smaller. Now for our case, we're just going to leave our footage as it is, but you guys are going to be learning also how we can use this and manipulate it to get the results which you want in After Effects. Now this being said, let's move over to the left side. On the left side, we have some very complex things. It's almost like the right side of the timeline is super simple and the left side is just super complex. Now, what do we have on the left side? The first thing you need to understand is this behaves as your layer inside of After Effects. So you've got your layer panel here, and this just showcases like all these different layers. And this is where it says source name. This is your layer. Now in After Effects, it's super simple. All of these, which sound very complex, are just basic functions, and they're just given the problem is like, they're not all shown in its a separate tab. They're just all stuffed into one tab, which is a good thing because once you learn them, you're going to be using them a lot. So for example, your name of your footage is over here. The actual layer itself, when you click on it, you'll be able to see it. Now, let's say I had another layer inside of here. Okay, you don't need to do this. If I have another layer, you guys can see these are 2 separate layers. If I have my solid layer on top of my video layer, I'm going to see my solid in front of my video layer. If I have it under, I'm going to see my video layer first. So it works just like Premiere Pro. Okay. The second thing you've got is to the left side, you have this eye tool. So this eye thing, when you click it off, basically makes your whole layer invisible. It doesn't make everything invisible. It makes just this layer invisible, or you can make it visible. Next to it, you've got your speaker. The speaker shows that there is volume or there's audio in this layer. So this is a video layer. Inside of After Effects, this comes with its audio. So when you click on it,
with lots and lots of
you can hear the audio. If I want, I can also mute the audio over here. And there we go, I'll no longer hear it. So these first 2 layers allow you to access this. It's either make it invisible or mute it. To the right of it, you have your pin. You're not going to talk about this. And to the right of that, you have your lock. So if you lock a layer, you'll no longer be able to access it or click it or do anything with it. This is useful for whenever you've got so much happening inside of After Effects that some layers you just don't want to mess around with. You're going to lock it, okay? To the right side of your lock, you're going to see a small little arrow. And this arrow is super useful because in this arrow, you find all of the settings of your layers, which we're not going to be talking now. Okay, we're going to be talking about this stuff later on once we start creating things. But once you click on your arrow, the first thing you're going to see is a transform effect. Under each layer, you're going to find the transform effect that allows you to change the anchor point of your layer, allows you to change the position of your layer, allows you to change the scale, the rotation, the opacity. And you guys are already familiar with this stuff from Premiere Pro. So let's quickly mess around with them to see what happens. If I take my position and I move it across like this, I can move my position horizontally or vertically. Let's Control Z to undo this. If I increase my scale, I can make it zoom in, decrease the scale, I can zoom out. I can also unlink the scale, I can rotate it, and I can mess around with my opacity. You guys are already familiar with this stuff from Premiere Pro. Now, the only difference is inside of After Effects, and this is super useful, okay? If you guys want to access certain attributes, instead of looking for them, it's so much easier. Let me teach you guys something. Let's say I want to access the position. Instead of clicking on here and going under transform, going to position, you can literally just select it and click on P, and you're going to have the position pop up. So the first letter of most different effects which you can change inside of the layer can just be accessed by selecting layer and writing it out. Like for example, if I click on S, I get the scale. If I click on R, I get the rotation. If I click on T, which stands for transparency, I can get the opacity. And if I click on A, which stands for anchor point, I can get the anchor point. So for that reason, it's very important to note these, because this is how you do work very quickly in After Effects. A lot of people have asked me, how is After Effects faster in Premiere Pro? That's how it's faster. You just access things so much faster. So get used to it, guys. Select your layer, click on P for position, S for scale, click on T for opacity, R for rotation, and A for anchor points. Once again, you're going to find this confusing, but as we get used to it, you guys are going to find it very simple. Now, to the right of it is you've got the color of the layer. You can click on this and change it to whichever color you want. That's not necessarily going to affect anything. And to the right of that, you've got the number of your layer. So if I have another layer over here, you guys can see that this layer is now numbered 2 because it's my second layer. Whereas if it's up top, it's numbered 1. Okay. Now, to the right of this, you've got your source name, which is the name of your layer. To the right of that, you've got the blending mode. The blending mode is how your video is blended inside of After Effects. We could have taught you guys this inside of Premiere Pro, but there was no need. So we're going to be teaching it to you guys inside of After Effects later on. But the blending mode is basically how your video is rendered. Is it rendered as light values, so on and so forth. So you could change all of these, and you guys will learn about this stuff later on. To the right side of that, you've got your track matte. The way that the track matte works inside of After Effects is also a bit confusing, but I will be explaining it to you guys in a separate course. And to the right of that, you've got your parenting and linking. And parenting and linking just means to which parent does this layer belong, and we're also going to be explaining this stuff in another masterclass in this course. So with this being said, that's pretty much all of the left side over here. Now, this being said, there's a few things that we're going to need to learn. Okay, there are buttons up here and there are buttons down here, and we need to understand both of these. So let's go ahead and quickly dive into them. You don't need this, and you only need 1, 2, and 3. Let's break them down. This over here is called your hide layer function. Now, when you toggle this, when you set a certain layer to hidden inside of After Effects, they're going to be hidden. When you set them to visible, they're going to be visible. Do I mean this eyedropper here? No, I'll show you guys how you can use this in a second. To the right of this, we've got our motion blur function. So if you enable this, you are going to enable motion blur for all of the layers inside the composition. And to the right of that, you've got your graph editor. We'll talk about the graph editor in a separate video where we break down animations and how to create complex animations in After Effects, but you guys don't need to understand that right now. Now, if you select your layer and you click on toggle switches and modes, things are going to change. You're going to lose the track matte feature, and you're going to get access to a bunch of other things. First up, this icon should look familiar. This is the hide function. So now if I toggle my hide on, none of these layers are hidden, so all of them are going to be visible. But if I hide this one, this layer is going to be invisible. Although it still exists and it still functions, it's going to be invisible on the timeline. That's only because I've toggled this hide function. If I turn it off, even though it's invisible, we can still see it. And if I turn it off and turn this on, we could still see it. Okay. So with this being said, this is useful for whenever you've got so many layers and you want to work on just a section. You basically make all your layers hidden, and you make that small section not hidden, and you hide all of the layers which you don't want to use. Okay. Second of all, over here to the right, you can toggle motion blur for just one layer. So let's say I've got a very cool animation on this specific layer and I want to turn on motion blur. I'll click on motion blur and have motion blur on for this specific layer, or we can make it a 3D layer with this 3D cubic box here, which you guys are going to be learning later on. So don't even worry about it. Okay. But these are the functions over here. Now over here in the bottom left, you've got some more functions. I'll be honest with you guys, I haven't used these in a while, so that's how you know that I'm not really using them. When you click them, they're going to give you more information. So like your expand on collapse gives you your in and out points. Your this button gives you the track matte. This stuff can kind of, make it smaller. Anyways, this stuff isn't really important. Once again, as I told you guys, I have never used these, so you're really not going to be using them. You're just going to be using the toggle switches and modes, because sometimes you need your switches and sometimes you need your track matte. So this being said, that breaks down the entire timeline. Let's quickly recap everything to make sure everything's in our mind. Yes, you feel like there's so many features and it's getting confusing. Don't worry, take a breath. We'll take it step by step and we'll make sure that you understand everything. We've got 40 courses, okay? So you're going to understand everything. But let's go ahead and quickly recap everything before we move on to our next lesson. This in front of us is our timeline, and the timeline can't work in a way like Premiere Pro. We can't have two things on the same layer in the timeline. Instead, we have them on separate layers. We've got a layer over here, which is our video. This blue thing over here determines our work area, or where we are allowed to work. This over here determines our zoom. And then over here on the left side, we can make things invisible. We can mute our layers. We can lock them to make them untouchable. We can click on our arrow button to access all of our settings. We can click on the color to the right of it to change the color. We can click on our source name. We can change the blending mode. We can add a track matte to it. We can parent it, or we can toggle switches, and we can access our motion blur and our 3D, or hide our layer to toggle our hide layer over here to hide all of these layers. Or we can click on this to access motion blur on everything, or we can click on the graph editor to access our graph editors. And that is how you understand the timeline inside of After Effects. Yes, it seems confusing, but with time, you're going to notice how simple it is. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to love it more than Premiere Pro. So this being said, guys, that's it for our third lesson. Let's go ahead and dive right into understanding the functions, and we can now start to begin to understand how this program even works and understand all these different functions that we can have inside of After Effects step by step. And we're going to be starting with text, the simplest one. So with this being said, guys, I'll see you in the next episode in which we're going to be creating some text. See you guys there.